Thank you, Sameena. That was a very comprehensive review of the book. And I wanted to just mention that in a book like this, which is a record, but also provides indications for future portent. Now, that is the importance of such records as to does it contain certain seeds which give you indications as how the tree will flower in the future. Now, unfortunately, we suddenly been hit by a black swan event immediately after the year that we have covered. But I found that there are certain aspects in the book which have long term trends. And I'd like you to comment a little bit more on that. One was the trend of the slowing global economy and a movement away from hydrocarbons that you have identified in the book, and what it means for the Persian Gulf economies and their social contract. So I'd like you to comment a little bit on that. The second was another very interesting alignment or a quasi alignment that you identified, which was Qatar, Iran, Turkey axis or quasi axis. Whether it will endure or not endure, we do not know. We see there are new movements between Turkey and Israel again, and things are always in a flux, and a year is a very long time in the Persian Gulf. And the third thing, which was very clearly identified in the book, was the strengthening relations between India and the Emirates and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You mentioned that in your opening remarks. Would you try and elaborate a little bit on that? And then I would like the two other co-authors to come in initially also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Should I respond, or you want my co-authors to come in first?
No, first you, and then we have Mudassir, and finally Professor Kumaraswamy.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, regarding the future projection. See, future is predicated on a number of factors. In economic jargons, we say business as usual scenario. Then there is a trajectory if you make a quantitative leap, or there is a trajectory if you fall off the trail and you go on a spiraling down trail. So yes, we have identified a couple of things. The long trend, we have identified, as I told you, the export growth. India's export growth to the region has been very sluggish. And this is a reason for concern. One case in the point is the issue of petroleum products. Now, India has been exporting petroleum products almost $50 billion per year, and it is among the top 10 export items. But if we minutely see in the region, our exports of petroleum products have been consistently and often steeply falling, especially in case of Saudi Arabia and other countries. Except for UAE, it has been falling in all the countries. One reason for this, and ironically, this is against the increasing imports of these products by these countries. They don't have sufficient refining capacity. They are increasingly importing these petroleum products. And they're doing it from China, and they're doing it from UAE. Now, if we look more closely at this, Saudi Arabia already has a 25% stake in a Chinese refinery. 2019 has picked up stakes in two more upcoming refineries. So the picture is clear. If there is delay from our sides in bringing certain joint ventures in refineries online. If we are not able to clinch that deal, we are going to lose on this front. So this is one set of scenario. As I've also pointed out, our exports of high value commodity, especially the top 10 exports that are listed in India's top 10 exports, they have a very low penetration in the region. And in cases like Oman and Kuwait and Bahrain, in some cases, we are actually losing ground. So unless, that's what I say, you have to create a brand value. So unless we are more aggressive in penetrating this region as a brand, we will be losing our share in their exports. We'll be losing in our share in their markets. And that doesn't bode well for us because we have to balance trade. And we look forward for more profitable trade venues from this region. Now, to the second question, COVID. COVID has reared its ugly face at a time when global economy was already in recession, had a very sluggish growth. And for this region, the year 2019, the oil prices were lesser than 2018. After the initial spurt, it actually declined substantially to the extent that many of these countries had negative growth rate in the third and the fourth quarter. So COVID has substantially, it has put India also in a retractory mode. So India and both Persian Gulf countries are in retractory phase. And they are facing some phenomenal challenge in terms of huge budgetary deficits, about $5 billion, which has been assessed, $100 billion in debt. So they're definitely going to tighten their belts. And they have, shaved off a lot of capital expenditures. And overseas investment will be put on hold. So when all these things come in, the big billion-dollar question will be, I will put my money where it matters most, where the returns are most. So the question of efficiency, question of cost cutting, question of productivity, question of returns become very paramount. And in this context, if I have to bring that joint venture proposal in which Aramco and ADNOC has agreed to pick up 25% each, estimates are there that have said that the project have been reevaluated and now the cost estimation is of $70 billion. Now that makes it one of the costliest project, even rivaling that one in Kazakhstan, which was the last costliest estimated project. So one can understand that a lot of steam will be, will come out of the enthusiasm. So COVID has, created new complications, and what will matter is the survival of the fittest. And I think I've answered slow growth aspect I've included in my this. Strengthening ties with UAE and Saudi Arabia. Yes, I mean, our ties with UAE and Saudi Arabia are definitely robust, has gone to a next level, is more or less aligned to our needs. But again, I'll comment more on the economic side. In Saudi Arabia, again, we need to go beyond the oil-dominated engagement. Joint ventures are important. And joint ventures in more, frontier areas, more knowledge-intensive, IT-enabled are important. In UAE also, the same thing applies. We are still, As far as UAE concerned, what we have noticed that India's relations with UAE is coming at a cost of its relations with other countries also. As far as trade is concerned, I've noticed there are certain items which are being increasingly exported to UAE, and the same items are being exported to some the other regional country like Oman is importing more from UAE and importing less from India. So there is a possibility that our over engagement or too much focus with UAE is coming at the cost of our relations with the other countries. And our engagements in there's a wide range of sectors where we can collaborate and cooperate. But again, the punchline is efficiency, speed and scale. The change is phenomenal in these countries. Now, these countries have, one of the lowest bids for solar projects, for desalination projects. So phenomenal is the change. So we have to rise to the situation and again promote India as a brand value if we have to take our relations to the next level. Maybe my co-authors can also add into what I have said just now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sameena. I will request Dr. Mudassir and Professor Kumaraswamy to come in right at the end. And before that, I'll subject you, Sameena, to some more questions which have come in from the audience. One very interesting question from Shirada is that she wants to know, she says that she wants to know, how does the Gulf look at India? Is India considered a stable and welcome partner? Do they wish to engage more deeply with India?
A lot of warmth, with a lot of interest. But in my assessment, it still doesn't have that confidence that is illustrative in a variety of ways. I think we all get a sense of warmth and enthusiasm with which the leaders of these countries embrace our prime minister, ministers. We all have been watching that very closely. But if we very carefully observe the message that comes when in Kuwait they insist that the accreditation has to be for our Indian engineers, the accreditation has to come from their own engineering societies. And there was this issue that was taken up when they came and they were apprised of all our ranking and accreditations. We can get a sense of when they say that only these selected, recognized hospitals can give COVID certificate. What does it mean? They're still very skeptical about how we function. So again, while they want to engage, but still they are very cautious. We can see it in investments. UAE, our star investor, as we call, the 10th largest, till very recently we have been knowing it to be. Nevertheless, it has still 1.5% of the total cumulative investment that has come into the region. But if we look at the figures closely, a very interesting message of conscious is there. In the year 2019, the total calendar year of 2019, the investment was something around 768, some figure around that. If we look at the investment of the financial year 2019 and 20, the figure comes to 300 something. It means whatever investment had come in the earlier first quarter, and very less amount of investment had come in the remaining years. And if you look at the parallel events in India, we were, decoupling our foreign direct investment policy with non-debt instrument policy, as we call it, NDI. We were decoupling the regulation of foreign investment between RBI and the central government. So when such policy flip-flops takes place, there's a lot of, and in this decoupling, there was a lot of, a lot of blurring of definitions, and a lot of things became amorphous. So investments are put on hold. And I said, and if I read it about my apprehensions about COVID, that only the best will succeed. Now we look at the figures. UAE is not among the top 10. So money will go where the smartest person is ready to put business into. So again, to summarize what the overall picture: interest, yes; warmth, yes; comfort, yes; but confidence yet to come.
Thank you, Sameena. I always said that if you stood in the Gulf, in the Musandam Peninsula, in the easternmost tip of the Gulf, what you would see if you looked across the sea, which is what the ancient mariners, Arabian seafarers would see, is this huge landmass on the horizon. And that is a fact of life and remain a fact of life. You have a second question, is that recently our External Affairs Minister, Jaishankar, pointed out that India needs to shift from traditional diplomacy to strategic diplomacy with a thrust on economics in West Asia. So Dipanvita wants to know, how was 2019 different from that perspective for India?
2019 presented a lot of opportunities for India in that particular aspect. We look at Iraq as an example. Iraq is facing a lot of reconstruction challenges, we all know. And of the 80 plus billion that was pledged in the reconstruction conference, only a fraction of it has come. The protest has also, stalled much of and disrupted much of the oil production. And oil sector also was hamstrung by a lot of political shuffles and protest also. So Iraq needs investment. It wants to sell its oil. It is cash strapped. So a sensible investor would probably club these opportunities if we see things in totality, and would have something like construction projects in lieu of oil deals. So this kind of strategy is what I would call as strategic economic engagement. Have oil deals where you can pay, they need money at this point in time. They are cash strapped. The oil deals where you can pay upfront for some time will help you to bring oil prices down. Prices are quite low. So if you negotiate such contracts at this point in time, it is for mutual benefit. So this is the kind of, engagement which can be strategically imagined, would probably fit into that. And if you look at Iran also, if you monitor closely Iran's engagement in Iraq, we have seen Iran's export of gas and electricity to Iraq was was given a waiver from US sanctions. Now this gives us an insight that if our projects have a definitive humanitarian content or have a very vital environment element to which everybody converges, you can, circumvent, navigate through these, hurdles that often come in commercial dealings.
Thank you. You have a very another interesting question from Bhupender Kumar Singh, which is how India and Gulf are cooperating for renewable energy. Are they cooperating at all? And as both have an agenda to increase share of renewable energy in their energy mix, especially in the post-COVID era.
Yes, the cooperation has definitely started, and many of the Gulf countries have joined our International Solar Alliance, uh, which India has taken a frontal role in. And there are investments, minor though, in our renewable energy companies like Adani. Qatar has invested in the renewable energy arms wings. Master is there. Aqua Power is there. Alfanar is there from Saudi Arabia and Gujarat. So it has started and it needs to be scaled up.
Okay. We have a detailed question from Meenakshi Sardar, which is you have touched upon the policy recommendations for India. She wish you to elaborate a little bit more now on that. Would you like to do it now or later up in your summing up?
I can see we had given couple of policy recommendation, and it would be unfair on my part to reveal all of it. So maybe one that I had already sounded, I can elaborate a bit on it. See, till now, most of the engagements are at political level or at business level. The delegations, business delegations goes, the officials goes. We need a more substantive and sustained engagements, and it has to be institutionalized. Institutionalized in the sense there has to be a known structure, there has to be a portal for interface. If we Google any of our joint business council, India, Bahrain Joint Business Council, forget about India UAE Business Council, forget about small countries councils. They don't exist. There is no web page. How would a person who had some success story would share his experience with his counterparts? We had a very successful enterprise in Kuwait. We had offered bioremedial of oil spills there in their oil field. We have done that, but that experiment, that success story was never replicated in any other parts of the region. So we need to institutionalize that so that the structures are known, their interface portals are there for rigorous, interaction and feedbacks. And again, diplomacy, dollar, and people, they all have to, coalesce with each other, work in tandem with each other, reinforce with each other, and then approach for any. It's all about, projection of your image, your brand. So that is one of the important policy recommendations.
Thank you. Professor Roy Chaudhary has a question about Brand India. May I ask her to pose her question herself?
First, congratulations to the three authors. It's always interesting when we get a publication from the West Asian lobby, and it comes every year religiously. Thank you. Um, my question was very simple, Sabrina, because brand imaging of India through software has been the major move, at least in East Asian nations. My question to you is, why is it not making some sort of an impact in the Gulf, considering there are, larger population engagement, which is typically what we say in the East Asian countries, that is probably the reason why it took a longer time for us to use a soft power. Given this, why do you think we are not able to get forward with our soft power?
No. I think we have gone far ahead as far as our soft power projection is concerned. And that is why I said India evokes a lot of warmth, a lot of enthusiasm. So that softness is there. The comfort with working with India is there. And we can see the warmth with which our Prime Minister Modi was received. The land allocation to the Hindu temple, the visit to temple in Bahrain. All this evokes of what do you say, of the connect, of that heart-to-heart connect.
Okay.
What I was talking about was that corporate branding, where you are recognized for your credibility, reliance, productivity in the corporate sense.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Sameena. May I now, before requesting Alvai to pose his question himself, may I just mention, as a response to Dr. Roy Chaudhary's question, once I was driving from Abu Dhabi to Dubai to catch a plane, and we had a small accident on the way. Our car was totaled, and I had to catch the plane. So Emirati stopped next there. And then they said, all right, you're from India. Where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to the airport. He said, we'll drop you. And then for the next 1 hour, they kept on singing to me songs from Indian movies to entertain me. Albeit, may I have you on this, on that?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Congrats, ma'am, for this new series again. I, in fact, was a part of it for 4 series. I have been promoting this book, ma'am, while I was with the think tank as well as with the government for 2 years. Many of the researchers, as well as diplomats and the serving diplomats, have really applauded this series. But a commonality of questions that they raised at me behind the purpose of coming out with this book is the analysis part of the book. So they have asked me a number of times about whether we are placing more importance on the data that the authors managed to collect, or analysis part of those data, or both. So where do you think the priority lies for Persian Gulf series, ma'am? Because I have not been a part of it over the last 3 to 4 series. What is your target audience, and where is the priority right now? Thank you, sir. Thank you.
See, the template of the book, as I have told in my initial remarks, is to analyze events that have unfolded in the region for the whole calendar year in the greatest possible detail and widest possible dimensions. So in that sense, anybody interested in knowing the region can benefit from the metadata that has been provided. They all can read, even if they don't have to understand India's relationship, but by itself, these metadata, there's some issue. Am I audible?
Would everybody mute, please?
Yeah. Thanks, sir. Thanks. So anybody who's interested in the region can have their own aha moments. And we have conducted an invasive inquiry through wide-ranging sources, national, international, media, government sources, think tanks, databases, so as to see the convergence and the discrepancies in the narrative. So that is one part. Two, the second part that analyzes India's relationship. That is for the consumption of students, scholars, policymakers, and even we've tried to bring in those details where even a corporate sector can get an insight as to what the changes are in the region, what are the opportunities from which viable business can spring. As we all know, today, your headache is my opportunity. So the challenges that confronts the region, the detailed narrative of, say, the energy sector, what are the problems, what are the issues. So they do give insight even to the business community to see where they can benefit. So it caters to a wide range of audience.
Thank you. Before I request Dr. Mudassir and Professor Kumar to come in, a few comments from you, Professor Kechichian.
Thank you. I actually had two small questions. One, of course, India is a huge country population-wise, whereas the Gulf countries are relatively small and limited. But it seems that the Indian government prefers to deal with the Gulf countries on a bilateral basis, not on a multilateral basis. That is, the preferences is, please let me know whether this is your reading as well, and whether I am correct in this analysis, that perhaps the time has come to do what the European Union is doing, that is to assign a particular diplomat in Riyadh to deal with the entire GCC as a unit. The same thing that's also happening with countries like Korea and others, South Korea, that are assigning diplomats in Riyadh to look at the entire GCC to more or less coordinate different countries' policies. That's one question. And the second, as I was listening to your fascinating presentation, which covered a lot of very interesting grounds, it reminded me of something that I had heard years ago when I was in Seoul, South Korea. The Korean workers that were throughout the Gulf countries toiling between the 1960s and 1970s brought back with them the seed money that really transformed South Korea into what it is today, which is the 11th largest economy on the planet. Now, of course, I understand that India is a much bigger country and that the numbers cannot be compared. But what, in your view, prevented all these millions of Indians that toiled throughout the Gulf countries to actually bring back the seed money and invest in India in order to boost its economy to the degree that it ought to show the results? Unfortunately, we have not seen that. So I'm sorry to be off on this second one. I need to really clear it in my mind some more, but I am talking as I'm thinking as I speak to you as well about this. But this is something which might be useful to think about in the future research activities, to make a comparison between Korean workers and Indian workers and how they contributed to their respective economies. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Kechichian. Fascinating questions, which I leave completely to Sameena to respond to.
Thank you, thank you. They were really billion-dollar questions, as I would call them. For your first question, yes, you have actually, said what one of our policy recommendations is to have a GCC mission in India, and what prevented India from engaging GCC as a bloc was the political bickering, the intra-GCC fighting. So India's traditional approach was not to get into that. So it preferred to deal with GCC countries bilaterally. One such avenue where it could have dealt with GCC was the India GCC free trade agreement, which did not progress in any meaningful manner after 2009. Although we tried to revive it in 2015, but no progress has been made so far on that. So that could have been one venue where it could have taken place. But yes, as of now, it is bilateral, and one of our policy recommendation is, as you have rightly pointed out, that others are also doing, and we would greatly benefit if we do that, because these GCC organization have many subcommittees which very routinely meets and have been quite successful in harmonizing and coordinating their economic policies, at least. So India would definitely stand to benefit in this respect. And for your second question, most of the workers, most of the expatriates who are there are low-skilled, semi-skilled workers employed in construction sectors, domestic sector, and they do send almost their complete saving to the families back home. And it has benefited the Indian economy in some sense. For example, the state of Kerala, it contributes nearly 20% of the state GDP. But it did not contribute in the way, as you have pointed out, as in the case of Saudi Arabia, because the people who are sending back this money are, are workers. They are not like entrepreneurs who could, invest it profitably. It has increased their living standards, no doubt. They have built houses, but they could not, invest in profitable ventures where it could be used as a seed money. And that's a good suggestion that the Indian government can work with these Gulf returnees and help them to plow this money in profitable ventures. And we will definitely take up more substantively in our coming volumes.
Thank you. We have already overshot our limit, but we'll extend it for another 10 minutes or so. May I now request Dr. Mudassir Kamar to make his comments?
Thank you, sir. I wasn't really prepared to make a comment, but thanks for the opportunity. And first of all, thanks, ma'am, for introducing this series. I mean, this volume in the series. I think you have very effectively kind of put across our collective thought in terms of what we together did. So thanks a lot for that. I'll just make three quick points. One is about which you raised the points in the beginning about the geopolitical developments. I think what we are looking at or what we are seeing is that all the countries, be it Turkey or Saudi Arabia or other regional countries also, they are now looking at the future, looking at a new kind of administration as far as the United States is concerned, and adjusting to the expected changes accordingly. Perhaps that is something why we are looking at Turkey trying to kind of not reverse, but kind of mend a bit of its relations with Israel, and then Gulf countries also trying to kind of not end the crisis, but make some progress to try and work towards a resolution of the Qatar crisis. But I think the larger trend of Iran being the challenging part as far as the regional, geopolitics is concerned and Indian foreign policy is concerned, I think that will remain. And we'll have to look at that in terms of how it pans out. The second point is about the larger India's bilateral, relations. I think the point which Professor Kishishian, mentioned. And thanks for raising that question. And as ma'am said, that one of our policy recommendations is that the time has come for India to, kind of take it further and look at the region more collectively and not forget about the micro issues at the same time. So time has come that from micro issues, from bilateral issues, we progress it to much larger, framework. And I think that is something which is very important at this stage. Some progress has been made, but a lot needs to be done, and it is perhaps our collective responsibility. And that brings me to the third point. So the whole idea, and maybe I can respond to the point which Alvite has raised, and he was part of the series in the early stages, 4 or 5 issues, and he contributed on very specifically on Iran, and then on other issues as well. But yeah, I mean this dilemma has been there, and what we want is to try and bridge the gap in terms of information and analysis both. And if I remember if our initial meetings with Sir, and Alvite also, you would remember that the first thing was to try and encourage more people to study the region and try and understand the region in a much comprehensive manner and come up with new ideas. So that was the early trigger and early thought which went into it. And I think from there on, things have progressed. If, for example, I go back and look at the 2012 and the 2020, things have progressed significantly. What we want is to try and kind of put more analysis, obviously, but there is certainly a lack of a gap in terms of data, a gap in terms of information, and I think that also is, that is one of the primary or initial aims which we wanted to kind of fill. So that is one of the reasons why we started, and I think we are here now discussing the larger issues. So I think that would count for a progress. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And now may I invite Professor Kumaraswamy to make his comments. And since 2020 has been an unprecedented year, when can we expect Persian Gulf 2021 to be on the table? Because that should make for fascinating reading.
Oh, thank you, Ambassador. And to answer your final remark, we finalized the manuscript in March. And that was the time COVID was about to be recognized as a major event. So we visualized that 2020 would be dominated by COVID besides Iran. And we said it in March, even though the volume is coming anytime soon. And we were able to read that. In that sense, we anticipated this is going to be a question. About the data, the purpose of a data is not to provide information. Data for us is an evidence to make an argument. So if you look at the right through the book, analysis doesn't mean that, no, you give a data in one page, analysis in another page. Analysis have to be substantiated. And that is what we have been trying to do right through the book. The only difference between this volume and the earlier volumes were earlier volumes, we did not have the benefit of an economist. And therefore, we were largely talking about the strategic issues without, general numbers. We didn't have a good economic data and economic interpretation. To refer to foreign minister's statement about we need to move away from the traditional and to have an economic-centric diplomacy, probably you must have seen the proof of our book, even before we could see it. Because if you look at it, this volume is largely economy-centric. And that was possible only because of Sameena joined us. And before that, we both could not manage our own individual finances. So when Sameena joined us as a trained economist, we were able to put up so much data in public domain, and our arguments, even in the strategic arena, is become much more valid. For example, as she was talking about Erdogan's statement, his statement about independent policy towards Iran was not backed by data. And we were able to say that the same applies to China. So China did not maintain the same level of oil imports from Iran. And we were able to do that on the ground. But only one final remark, if I can say, is that no, this is the 8th volume. We had a few book events in the past, but we never had a reaction from the floor. We only told about the book. Everybody said, nice things, and we left, had a coffee and pushed off. Today, we don't have a coffee, but we were able to benefit from the questions from the floor. And for instance, whether it's Kishishan's questions about do we benefit from the remittances? One can even go a step further. Can we use the skill of the Gulf returnees in improvising, modernizing our construction sector, for instance? They're still on the ancient human-driven construction, whereas the Indian unskilled labor works in modernized construction process. So can we actually benefit, instead of sending skilled people, can we benefit from the skills of the returnees? So these are the questions probably we were never thought about it unless the questions came about. But, only thing we could say that the COVID is going to be a dominant discourse in this year. And we are working on the volume. And the only thing is we want to have the next volume by the middle of the year rather than in the end of the year, so that more people will benefit from this event. And I think I stop at this point of time. I'll leave it to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Professor Sameena, any final comments?
Yeah, just that all these feedbacks and questions and queries are triggers, are food for thoughts for the coming volume. And we hope to substantially upgrade it, more rigor, and look at it with much more rigor and bringing in new dimensions as it unfolds in the region. Thank you very much for all the comments.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to MEI for bringing out another volume of Persian Gulf 2020. We look forward to Persian Gulf 2021. Let me wish everybody, before I ask Professor Kumaraswamy to conclude the last MEI webinar of the year, let me take this opportunity to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you very much for being here today.